Hi, I'm the Mayu, and in today's video, I'll be turning this into this. That's right, we're making a temperature blanket. So, if you like spreadsheets, crocheting, time-lapse, and yes, of course, some cat interruptions, then this is the video for you. Now, typically, the purpose of a temperature blanket is to crochet or knit one row a day throughout the year with a corresponding color for that day's temperature, but I don't have the attention span or patience to do that every day, so instead, I made all of last year's blanket at once. I'm in the United States, and our National Weather Service has a handy-dandy website that tracks a ton of data, including past weather. So I used that to search by region, filter by each month, and then copied the data I needed into a spreadsheet to compile all of last year's temperatures together. I decided to use the max temp for my blanket. I've seen people use an average temperature or just the lows. There are no rules, do whatever you want. And with this, I had all of the data I needed from last year within a few minutes. Since I'm stash busting my existing yarn collection, I need to create a color guide based on the available yarn I already have. So I made a pivot table by count of max temp, and now I have a starting point with the lowest temperature at 21 degrees Fahrenheit and the highest temperature of 94 degrees. And more importantly, I have the count of how many rows per temperature there are for a total of 365 rows. That gives me how many rows per degree there will be for the year. When I swatched a sample, I estimated I'll use 5 grams of yarn per row, thus a maximum of 20 rows per skein. And I literally weighed out how much of each color I had in my stash, and then counted out how many rows I could get per color. For example, color 1, I am counting down to 10, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 21 is too many, so color 1 will correspond with temperatures 21 to 33. And then color 2, I didn't have quite a full skein, and 16 rows would have been too many, so temperatures 34 to 36 degrees will be for color 2, and so on and so forth. And because I'm extra, I also added color fills to help me visualize roughly what each color's number represents. Now, with my color guide complete, I just need to add these to the corresponding temperatures that I compiled before, and a quick VLOOKUP does the job in a few seconds. I also added the color fills just to get a rough idea what the final blanket will look like. This is not a necessary step, but it helps me to visualize it. What I actually used was this printable sheet that has the color, date, and temperature with a space to check off each row as I finish. I also printed this guide that I didn't end up needing at all, but it looks pretty. And with all the boring math and data sorted out, I quickly got started cranking through this blanket, following the guide for when to change colors along the way. And I kept all of the yarn organized in these numbered plastic baggies for each color, and then worked my way down the checklist, marking a plus for each finished row and a dash for the row I'm currently on. And away we go! I chose to do a simple seed stitch. I like how it is a little more dynamic with the colors blending together rather than just stripes that a single crochet would make, but still a very short and simple stitch, which is good because, as you'll see by the end, this ends up being a very long blanket, even with these short rows. There is a great tutorial by Hooked by Robin that goes into detail on how to do this stitch and helps simplify how to do the color changes. I'll add a link to that video in the description. To end and start each row with a color change, I would finish the last stitch but not pull through the final loop yet. Then I'll take the next color, in this case yellow, and leave a little bit of a tail about 4 to 5 inches long. Then loop it onto the needle and pull it through to finish the final stitch of the previous row. Then I chain stitch once with the tail included, drop the tail, and do a second chain stitch to finish that row. Then flip the whole thing over to start the next row with a single crochet 1, then chain stitch 1, and continue working down that row with single crochet 1, chain stitch 1, and continue on for the rest of the blanket. And now we are entering the time-lapse portion of this video. Of course, my supervisor keeps checking in to make sure I'm working hard. When I first got this idea to make this temperature blanket 2 weeks ago, it really started purely as a stash busting project. I've had this massive bag of Cascade 220 superwash wool that I've been lugging around apartment to apartment for years. Like literally, I've had some of this yarn for over 10 years. But anyways, I finally decided that I'm not saving this yarn for anything else, and I have enough to make a whole blanket, so might as well use it up and get some space back in my closet. I also had a bit of a unique situation last year in that I moved across the country midway through the year, so I decided to add an additional personal touch by using East Coast temperatures for the first half of the year, then West Coast temperatures for the second half. I didn't even have this intention when I started, but it's really neat that I can see the exact moments from last year in this blanket, like the day I got engaged, the day we moved across the country, something no one else would notice or frankly care about, but have permanent importance to me and my partner and are now immortalized forever in this very tangible object. So what originally started as purely impulsive stash buster project now turned into something incredibly sentimental and is a visible representation of the major life-changing moments we went through last year together. And something about that choice, it inadvertently transformed this into a very deeply personal and hugely important piece that now lives in our home. Anyways, I would definitely make a temperature blanket again like this, compiling all the previous year's temperatures at once. I will never have the patience or attention span to do one row a day throughout the year like a traditional temperature blanket, but I would like to try the more traditional approach of randomizing the temperatures, as it were, by assigning colors per fixed temperature ranges and then see how much yarn I need per color to see what that looks like. I would also make the rows much wider. I cast on 268 stitches for this blanket, and it's a great lap blanket. It's just very narrow compared to the finished length, and the proportions would look better with wider rows. Full disclosure, I do not really crochet in this typewriter style format. It just makes for a more interesting video. I mostly just plop the whole blanket in my lap and then work the stitches in front of me. Like this. After about a week, I have finished the last row. I pull the end through to finish the last stitch. Check off my sheet to finish the last day. And now I have to deal with all these loose ends. I took the lazy route and just turned these into tassels. I gathered the loose yarn ends into groups of 3, tightening up any loose slack before securing them in place with an overhand knot. Being very careful to make sure the knot stays right at the edge of the blanket, like this. And then sometimes, when there were multiple rows of the same color, that meant there was no color change to leave a loose end, which created a gap in the tassels. So, to fix that, I will create a fake tassel to fill in that space. So here I have a guide yarn, and we'll use that to measure out the length of the color I need. And I will cut it off camera, which is so helpful, but you know what I mean. Then I just take that yarn, and in the first row of the orange, I will pull one end through, like this. And in the second row, I will pull the other end through, like this. And then just even out the ends roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that's it. I won't knot or anything, I just leave them loose. Then I create the first tassel by gathering the blue, yellow, and first half of that orange end, very carefully tying an overhand knot without pulling too much on the orange yarn to make the first tassel. And then I'll take the second end of the loose orange yarn and create the next group of 3, orange, green, and dark orange, and then, you guessed it, tie an overhand knot to secure the ends. So here's that first half of the orange yarn and the other half of the orange yarn secured, filled in, and now you can't even tell that there was a gap at all. And with that, the blanket is finished! A whole year done in a week. I love this skinny little blanket and all of the memories it holds from a very chaotic year. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. That's all for today, and I'll see you in my next video.